Coming up on Currently, Beth Milligan will share updates on the major winter storm that left northern Michigan at a standstill, plus the latest on the officer-involved shooting and how AI is being used in the classroom. A special student journalism report from the Northern Express. All of that and more on Currently. Welcome to Currently, where we discuss some of the top local stories directly from the journalists who are covering them, and I'm your host, Christal Frost. This podcast was recorded on Wednesday, March 18th. Tiger baseball is so close, I can smell it. Support for Currently comes from West Shore Bank. When you choose West Shore Bank, you are not just choosing a bank, you are choosing a partner committed to the well-being of our community. Visit them today on 8th Street in Traverse City or at westshorebank.com. Support also comes from the Fresh Coast Film Festival, Traverse City. Don't miss the Friday night gala featuring listers. It's a glimpse into extreme birdwatching at the City Opera House. Check out the full lineup and get tickets at tc.freshcoastfilm.com. And support comes from Old Town Playhouse, where community comes together in downtown Traverse City. Welcome back, Beth Milligan.
Hi.
Remember last time we were here and it was really warm and there was no snow, and now?
And now it was, what a difference.
What
a little time
difference.
makes.
Like 3.5 feet of snow, I swear, fell at my house.
I know. Yeah, I just was able to, we're recording on Wednesday, I was just able to dig out Tuesday yesterday.
Wow.
And I think we were still feeling it. There was still a lot of people, even today, Wednesdays, the secondary roads are still getting addressed.
Yeah.
Some people are still buried in their subdivisions. So we're still feeling the impacts.
I was driving downtown today, Wednesday, and it's kind of a marvel at how the city removes snow in the downtown location.
Yeah.
Because there's they kind of, plow as much as they can for the two roads. And then there's a big, giant, massive heap in between of snow. And they have to get these giant, dump trucks, essentially, that they fill up. And then the dump trucks, drive away. It's a marvelous thing to watch.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big problem, that when you have this much snow fall this fast, is not just clearing the roads, but where do you put all the snow? Yeah. It's a big challenge. So we, had the storm move in Saturday night. I was involved with different events and organizations that I was seeing, on Saturday, even start to track the storm and move. Like we had talked about the TC Phil concert last week. They had moved that from Sunday afternoon to Saturday night. We were having conversations at the Bay Theater about canceling our programs on Sunday. And I think, what's challenging in situations like this is there are so many Northern Michiganders who pride themselves in sort of being hardy and
for sure.
We can, a little snow, we can deal with it. I used to walk to school uphill both ways. Yeah, exactly. And so sometimes I think it's a challenge for event organizers and businesses, especially when you cancel preemptively, like TC Phil did. You're always going to get some folks who are like, is this really necessary? This is a lot of, hoopla. But then as we saw with this storm, it just kept coming.
Yeah,
it was not just Sunday. It went to Monday and then into Tuesday. Very disruptive.
The meteorologists, too, who have a very difficult job because they're supposed to be, tracking and then predicting the severity of these storms. And I've always said, be nice to the meteorologists, because weather can change, projections can change, it can happen kind of last minute, but they're looking at the overall picture and they're trying to give you a heads up so you can plan for it. And I think in the past, when something didn't pan out, as maybe their first initial predictions, people have grown a little cynical and been like, oh, you don't know anything. Well, they do. Yeah. And they were warning us for a very long time, this thing is happening. Friday is kind of the first. That's just a warm up, baby. Yeah. And then you're going to get into Sunday, Monday, and even into Tuesday. And I felt a little bit of sort of poetic justice for that.
I know. I posted about this because it is a little bit frustrating when you're in the news to get the constant, backlash when you're trying to just keep people safe, and that's, I'm not a meteorologist, but we are passing on the weather predictions from our, cohorts who are in that industry. And, the best case scenario is the predictions are wrong and you're safe and you're warm and your power stays on.
Woohoo. Yay.
But the worst case scenario is, for example, we saw on Monday night when, a lot of people were expecting by Monday the storm was going to pass. Monday night at 7:00, GT Emergency Management said this is a life-threatening storm. Shelter in place on Monday night. There were parts of M72, US 31, and Grandview Parkway that were shut down, which I have never seen in my lifetime happen because of weather. And so it was just impassable. So I think, I had started to see on Sunday morning people being like, well, this isn't so bad. And I was like, you guys, this is just starting. Please take these, considerations seriously. And also, it just varies so much from neighborhood to neighborhood. We're actually seeing that with the cleanup now as we're in recovery mode. I was seeing it yesterday and Tuesday. We had another TCAPS cancellation, 4 snow days in a row. So my heart goes out to the parents who are just going absolutely insane right now.
Right.
I don't know if I've ever seen 4 TCAPS snow days in a row in my time in the city, and that's been over 3 or 4 decades. But it can vary so much, and so what you're seeing in your neighborhood, the plows might come through. You're like, well, I can get to town, but a mile or 2 down the road, they haven't gotten there yet. So it really does vary. We saw. TVC was shut down. The airport was shut down for a period of time. In addition to the highways we mentioned, we are starting to get some totals in now. I mean, in Grand Traverse County, many areas had pretty close to 2 feet of snow. Drifting can obviously make that much higher.
That's actually snowfall.
That's snowfall.
Okay.
And then, of course, you get, your snow piles from where we're plowing into, and also drifting has made in some areas. When I dug my car to my driveway, the snow was up to my passenger window.
Wow.
So probably closer to 3 or 4 feet. And other areas in northern Michigan, for example, we were lucky in Grand Traverse County. Most of us kept power, which is a thing to be extremely grateful for. It is. Because if you looked at the power outage map, in a line south of us from like Cadillac over to Alpena and north of us, like near the bridge into the UP, where they got 3 to 4 feet of snow in the UP, a historic storm up there, tens of thousands of people lost power. So we were pretty lucky here. But, I think the old timers will always tell you about the blizzard of 78. The blizzard of 78. I wasn't alive in 78, but I can say I have been in Traverse City since 1987, and this is the worst storm that I've ever seen. A winter storm here.
So, and just a couple of facts about the blizzard of 78. That was in January, first of all, January 25th through 27th. You had some extreme wind gusts, so that blizzard factor was really there. But they had some parts of Michigan had up to 30 inches. And then I believe, maybe Traverse City had even more. So that's a lot of snowfall. It was also during more of an appropriate time for a blizzard. And I just want to say that because this felt unique in the fact that it was in March.
Yeah, 100%. And also, like you had mentioned, a week ago, I knew people who were wearing sandals. and then this hit, and we're, technically the official start of spring is upon us. You mentioned baseball. We've got baseball starting. Yeah. We've got Oberon Day coming up, which is my start of spring.
Yep.
And so to have a storm like this, I mean, it just reminds you, Northern Michigan, you always have to be ready for the fake spring because it can still be brutal, well into April.
I do need to offer a correction. 30 inches was southern Michigan. Traverse City in the blizzard of 78 had 51 inches fall.
Wow. Okay, so we didn't get there. We had a couple feet here, not 51 inches. So 78, you old timers, you still went through the worst of it. But this is probably the worst one we'll maybe see in our time. We'll see.
Absolutely. Well, and I have to say too, kudos to all of the people who were keeping us safe. I mean, places don't always close. We saw a lot of businesses that, could close. They were closing. Essential workers still had to get there, hospitals and people who were, EMTs and, firefighters and, the people who had to be at work.
Electricians.
Yes.
Shout out to the, road commission drivers, everyone who was plowing. Lots of extra private plows were out there. And again, today, they're still cleaning up. It'll probably still take a few days. We are supposed to get warmer temperatures towards the end of this week, which might help a little bit with some melting. But definitely one for the books.
Yeah. Definitely one for the books. Well, that was a big story. We also had another big story that happened just before the big snowstorm. And that was the police involved shooting that happened in Traverse City. Why don't you walk us through that?
Sure. So this happened last Friday. We found out from the Michigan State Police and the Traverse City Police Department that there had been an officer-involved shooting. So The police had been called to a residence on Munson Place in Traverse City on Friday in response to a reported domestic assault that involved stabbing. When the officers arrived at the scene, according to their accounts, what happened was they walked into the house. There was a man in the living room. He approached officers, kind of charged officers with a knife. He was given commands to drop the weapon. He was tased. That did not deter him. And then he was shot and killed by Traverse City Police Department officers. That person's identity, who was starting to circulate on social media over the weekend, we did wait until we had official confirmation from authorities to confirm that that person was Darnell Wilson. He's a 50-year-old Traverse City man. A lot of people happen to know him because he's a pretty well-known personality who works at Costco in Traverse City. Very outgoing individual that a lot of people remember from that store. So he was the person involved. In a case like this, when there's an officer-involved fatality, it's standard procedure. The officers who were involved in the incident were placed on paid administrative leave. That does not mean that they did something wrong necessarily. It just provides time for an investigation to unfold, kind of takes them out of the situation.
Right.
Also, the flip side of this are people wondering, because some people thought that appeared punitive or was blaming them. It also gives them some emotional recovery time. It's very difficult when an officer is involved in a shooting like that.
Absolutely, it would be difficult. And then they do an independent investigation. Is that right?
That's correct. So rather than the TCPD investigate itself, which obviously would make people perhaps question the results or if it could be fair or objective, they bring in an outside agency. So the Michigan State Police is investigating the officer shooting component of this case. The domestic assault is still being investigated by the TCPD. So there's two aspects of the case there that are still both in active investigation. I will say that the latest update that we had from Michigan State Police is they are still investigating the shooting. So when we have updates on the outcome of that, including details, some pretty straightforward details we haven't been able to confirm yet, like how many officers were involved. Those are all kind of sensitive details they haven't shared yet, but will. We're also awaiting the outcome of the domestic assault investigation. So in the meantime, the woman who was in the house, the TCPD has not named her. We do know her identity. We have not named her at her request.
Yeah.
She has asked for privacy. That's not uncommon for us to honor that when victims are involved in a case
victim,
like this.
For sure.
Yes. She is in stable condition. The TCPD said as of Tuesday, this is a 58-year-old Traverse City woman, that she had sustained several lacerations and stab wounds during the domestic assault, one of which caused serious internal injuries requiring emergency surgery. She was in stable condition. She is getting, at the time that we had received the last update, she was getting ready to be released from Munson. There are GoFundMe campaigns that have been launched both for the woman and also for Darnell's funeral expenses by his family. We linked to both of those in the story if people were interested in either of those. The only thing I'll say about this, Christal, that, this kind of reminded me of other sensitive, crime situations we've covered, like the Walmart incident, for example. When there's a high-profile case like this, there tends to be, we've talked about this on the show, a lot of public speculation. Yep. A lot of that is premature and can be harmful.
Yep.
We've had to, delete comments in our comment section of people trying to out the victim. We've had to deal with people, sending us a police scanner audio and asking why we're not reporting on that. I have heard the dispatch call.
Yeah.
I hear that audio. I will just remind folks that can also be an incomplete picture. What you're hearing on a call is not the full scope of what has happened at a scene typically. And there's crosstalk happening between responders on a 911 call. So I just want to let folks know from a reporting side, we do look at all of that. We do our own investigations, but we're also trying to respect the fact there is an ongoing active investigation by authorities that we don't want to interfere with.
Sure.
We don't want to out victims unless they are either coming forward or the TCPD finds a necessary reason to disclose their identity. That does sometimes happen, but that has not happened here. And I just encourage folks to remember, we don't know the full details of people's lives, including whether you knew Darnell or not, or you knew the victim or not. We just haven't had a lot of details confirmed by authorities about what happened. And so we're trying to proceed carefully with sharing information as it's vetted by authorities.
I think, and I think this is this happens sometimes too, because I would say that Darnell Wilson was a public personality, right? Because a lot of people knew him as the self-checkout, guy at Costco. He did have a big personality. That's called a parasocial relationship, though, when it's kind of one-sided and one side of one person's relation, sort of personality, and you can see that person and you can say, oh yeah, that seems like a great guy. And I think the same thing happens in media, right? So if you're a public personality at all, people are going to know that one side of you, what you portray to the public. But that's important to remember too, that it's parasocial, and that it is one-sided, and that there is probably a larger picture with everyone, including me. Right? I'm a public personality. People know one side of me, unless you really know me, and then boy, I'm sorry.
It gets better, I think. But yeah,
but I think that's important to remember too. So it feels very personal to you, because you say, I knew that person. That person was a part of my weekly life or my daily life in some cases. And it can be really difficult, and you're going to go through a grieving process there as well. But just to remember that there are multiple sides to every story, and to take a beat before you come to the defense of anyone in a situation like this. Let people step back, take a breather, and then hopefully we'll figure out the rest of the details.
Yeah, and what's definitely unquestionable is that there are a lot of people grieving involved.
Absolutely.
For all of the parties involved. And again, this is a complex situation for authorities as well. That
and families
and having to determine what happened with the police side, if they were justified in their actions, and that will come out through an investigation. What happened in the incident that preceded the shooting between these two people at this house, we don't know those things, and we are certainly working with authorities to share details as we can. But again, when it is active, just remember that can take time.
Absolutely. And thank you for linking to both GoFundMe pages. I just want to shout out both were very, very tastefully done. And one is to help with the funeral expenses for a child, a 23-year-old who has now been sort of laid with the responsibility of burying her father. And another for the medical expenses and the work loss and all of the other things for the victim. And I think it was good to have both links to both pages. Well, on that note, we are going to take a quick breather for a moment. We're going to come back after this, and we have a couple of really great stories to share with you, including Project Alpha has been approved, and we have a very special Northern Express student issue. But first, a word for our friends at the TC Fresh Coast Film Festival. So this is the wonderful Fresh Coast Film Festival that you know and love from Marquette, but it's the Traverse City edition. Yeah, that's right, guys. It's something really, really special happening right here in our community. The Fresh Coast Film Festival coming to Traverse City for the very first time, running April 30th through May 3rd. And it's all about celebrating the stories that define this place. The place we love, our water, our land, our people, and that adventurous Great Lakes spirit. We're talking 50-plus incredible films, filmmakers coming in from across the country, Q&As, outdoor experiences, and events happening all over downtown and the Boardman Lake District. There are even special gala nights at the City Opera House and a free opening night community screening, so there's truly something for everyone. Now, if you love film, if you love Northern Michigan, or honestly, if you just love a really good story, this is your festival. Grab your tickets now at tc.freshcoastfilm.com, and I'll see you there. All right, welcome back. Beth, we are kind of moving into another story here, and this is Project Alpha, which I don't know. I love a good title. It's a good title. Tell us all about Project Alpha and how it's recently been approved.
Yeah, so county commissioners met on Wednesday and approved this project. It's been discussed for about 2 years now. We've had multiple stories in the ticker on it, so folks will probably have heard that name before. Project Alpha is kind of the code name for the planned expansion of the county's Lafreniere Road campus. So there are 2 new buildings that are planned to go on that campus. One is a emergency operations and communication center, primarily giving an expanded GT 911 dispatch center. with some other emergency operations. And then the second building is being called a centralized operations building. It will essentially provide space for multiple departments that need it, including the county's facilities management. So you got your vehicles, all that kind of stuff, and the Commission on Aging outdoor services. So the project on Wednesday, what commissioners approved was a guaranteed maximum price.
Okay.
So Cunningham Limp, which is the project manager for this, they, went to contractors, basically got, what the estimates are going to be for all these different parts of the project. It's just under $28 million. So they approved that price, which means they won't go over that. And then what's going to be happening in the coming weeks is in the next month or so, they're going to be deciding how much of that $28 million they're going to pay from different county funds, like cash that they're going to put upfront essentially into the project versus bonding and taking on debt for the project. They do have a little over $13 million available from different funding sources. If they were to put all of that in, it would significantly cut down how much interest you have because you have to bond less. So that could save millions of dollars. So we're kind of talking about that approach. And then the goal is to break ground in April, likely mid to late April, with the buildings opening in late spring, early summer 2027. So that is going ahead. They have given the okay to it. It's just this next 45 days is what is called the bonding referendum period. It just gives voters a chance to submit petitions if they want to somehow force the bonding on the ballot.
Okay.
In my experience, that doesn't happen very often. It's not a contentious project that I've seen. So if that doesn't happen, then the 45 days pass and they're good to go with bonding.
So I do have a question about, kind of the layout here, especially regarding what we just went through with this storm. Do they have like bunk beds and bunk houses for those emergency management officials, GT 911 operators that, sometimes if they're telling people not to drive, they're not going home.
Yeah, and that's a good question. I think this is set up to be like an operations center like that if they have to if they have a natural disaster.
Yeah.
One of the things that they had worked on with the project is the commissioners had voted to add solar panels to the buildings, which will help with long-term efficiency costs. And also they are installing a well on the site, which is important because it will provide irrigation for the property, which will help with some costs there, but also backup potable water if our public water goes down.
Potables.
So that's just another investment into, essentially trying to equip this property to really handle emergency operations in the future if needed. And dispatch, if, people know the dispatch center, it is overcrowded now. So this will provide some much needed space for them.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's move on to a story. The Northern Express and our friend Jillian Manning, who is the chief editor for the Northern Express, helps to put together this really special issue every year. And it's all written by student journalists. And they tackle lots of different topics here. But why don't you tell us a little bit more about this? I'm kind of obsessed with this right now. So tell me more.
Yeah, I know this is a project that Jillian is really proud of and is really kind of unique. It provides, as someone who was at my school newspaper in high school at TC Central and really think that's kind of, how I got my start into journalism. I love seeing opportunities for students to have their voices out there and then to have it published in a major publication like the Northern Express, gives the students legitimacy. They have a byline now and a big, publication locally. And so it's called the Voices of the Next Generation issue. The entire issue is written almost entirely by high schoolers. So she works with different schools, different students. And I just thought, the range of topics that they cover in this issue this week, talk about a hot topic, artificial intelligence.
Yes.
How it's being used in the classroom. So there's a student journalist who writes about that from their perspective.
Right.
And we've written about what TCAPS is doing, but to hear it from a student, I think is a different angle.
Yeah.
Some other ones I'll just mention. I just thought the topics that they covered are so thoughtful and interesting. What does the political landscape look like to teenagers? One article is, we need to talk about the lack of eating disorder treatment up north.
Wow.
I don't know about that topic. That was interesting to me. How beta helps students with mobility, employment, and education.
Love that.
So their reliance on public transportation. The ethics of zoos. Should all animals be free? So looking at some of the history of the Clinch Park Zoo, for example. There's just so many other great stories in there. And so these students work really hard on this. Jillian works with them, really helps cultivate them. And I think it's a fantastic issue. It's out this week. It's also on northernexpress.com. You can read the whole issue for free there.
There's even a student guest opinion, which I think is, it's fantastic. You have to pick it up free at newsstands in 23 counties or something like that?
Yeah, it's all across northern Michigan. You probably see it at the bookstore, the gas station. We've got great distribution. So it's available many places, your grocery stores, things like that. So.
How did you, this one story that we kind of highlighted here, the artificial intelligence being used in the classroom, how does the student journalist feel about that? Because I know that, for a lot of people in media and journalism, there is a real concern, not just about AI being used in journalism, but about it primarily being used and not fact-checked. So you might have very large media companies that are using and relying on AI, and the idea is to get the story out first, right? But if the story is inaccurate, what good is it?
Yeah. I mean, I know as a, someone in their 40s, I'm grappling with this for the reasons that you talked about, seeing, it change my industry, even locally, having real conversations about how this is going to impact journalism along with many other industries. What I think was great about what this student did is she talked about AI from a teacher's perspective. So she interviewed a teacher. She talked about it from a student's perspective, so she interviewed a student, and also from administrator's perspective, so talking to the TCAP superintendent, Dr. John Van Wagner. And I was surprised to hear some of the student perspectives. I think we often think of new technology like AI as something that young people are just, they're growing up in it, they're native to it, they love it, they're using it, whether we like it or not, to cheat on assignments or even just help them with assignments. Right. And I think, I know some young people in my life, my niece and others. I think they have much more complicated feelings about AI than we think. They're worried about their future, their jobs, especially people, like my niece who's an artist. I think it's more complicated than we think. And that was shown in the story, which I thought was really interesting to read.
I have a team at my day job and a couple of younger individuals who are on that team. And, just talking about, there's one individual who is just out of college and just talking about, the use of AI in college. And she's like, why would I go into debt?
Yeah.
The way that you go into debt when you're going to a 4-year university to not learn something, just to use this sort of crutch or even, cheat sheet in some cases and not actually be able to learn the information, which I think is a really important thing to remember too, that, I think AI has its place and can be, very useful in a lot of areas. But if you're trying to learn something, it's like the Cliff's Notes, just read the book, right? Learn it. And then if you can use AI at some point to help and enhance your business or your career or whatever, great. But you need to be able to know enough to fact check it too. Yeah,
I mean, I think I would just say that the healthiest approach I'm seeing advocated in many industries is to use it as a tool, not as a creator. Yes. So especially like in journalism, it can help you search a court document for what you need, for example, but you wouldn't have it ethically or ideally, generate your copy for a story, wouldn't write the story for you.
Yeah.
So those are examples, but we also then have to wrestle with, even if you're using it just as a tool, what is AI doing to our environment? How is it impacting communities with data centers? It's a very complicated topic, but I love seeing a student take on it.
Yeah, love that. I love that idea. And, you can pretty easily spot an AI story.
Yes, you can. I think so. Yeah.
Definitely if you are reading it and you're going, wait, that's not right. That's not the name of that business.
Yeah.
Just a quick aside there. All right. Thank you so much for those stories. And thank you to Jillian for bringing in that special issue every year. Once again, Northern Northern Express, student issue. You can pick it up on newsstands right now, or you can go to northernexpress.com.
Yes.
Easy to remember. Beth, you are the head writer for the Traverse City Ticker. Always fun to have you here. And what we like to do at the end of the show is to talk about what we're excited about in the next week. What are you excited about?
Yeah, so I'm going to give a plug to the Bay Theater, as I often do, because I'm on the board out there, but also I just love the program that they're doing. So for people who are opera fans, this Saturday starts a series of 3 live in HD Met Opera events. So we're streaming the opera. It's live streaming. We have the satellite receiver on the theater. It's in beautiful, a 4K in our projection. The one on this Saturday, is Tristan und Isolde. It is almost 5-hour opera. Yeah. It starts at noon at the theater, but we have this is the way to see it. There's 2 intermissions. We're partnering with Birdie Sandwiches. So you, in addition to normal popcorn and pop, you can buy a food pass that gets you delicious appetizers during intermission. It's just a whole afternoon opera extravaganza. So I recommend folks check that out. And we have 2 other ones coming up this spring. So if you're an opera fan, I recommend that.
So excited. That's going to be fun.
And I also wanted to give a quick plug because he's been a friend of ours and so many people in the community, but Pete Peterson, amazing chef who sadly recently passed. There is a celebration of life for him coming up this Sunday. I believe it's at 2:00. We do have information on the ticker on that. If you Google Pete Peterson Traverse Ticker, you can find that. And also his dinner that was honoring his life with all these chefs from all over the country who've been impacted by him has been moved to Monday night. It is sold out, but it'll be a nice tribute to Pete. So.
Oh, I love that. That's great. Well, I have to say I've had quite a whirlwind of about 6 weeks. And, that has come to an end as my stepdad passed away this past Sunday. So I am looking forward to a little week of just kind of doing nothing this weekend, sitting back. I've been watching a lot of the Beverly Hillbillies, which is what we were watching together before he passed. So I'm just kind of binge watching that, taking care of myself, and then getting to the funeral, which will be on March 28th. So interesting stuff that happens when you transfer from the caretaking role and then into the sort of administrative role of trying to make sure that the end of life stuff is taken care of, right? There's a lot of documents involved, things I didn't know.
There's always so much paperwork, sadly.
And you and I both are eldest daughters.
Yes.
So we sort of naturally just go, I'll take care of it. I'll do it. I'm going to do that. So I'm really happy I'm just going to spend some time with my mom, and we're just going to be, chilling for a while, and then we're going to say our final goodbyes next week. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I'm glad. Thank you for everything you've done, I know, with the family. Yeah. And it's been a nice way to honor Jim's life. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, Jim Frost, everybody. A great guy. I will say more about him after the funeral, but I'll tell you, being able to be present in someone's life like that at the end of it, nothing else. I mean, it is such a gift. Yeah. So that's enough of that. All right. Well, thank you to Beth Milligan, head writer for the Traverse City Ticker, for another incredible episode of Currently. Be sure to subscribe to the show on all the platforms at crystalfrost.com. Follow us on social media and subscribe to Currently with Christal Frost wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch the full show on YouTube and on Facebook. Currently is a Compass Local podcast produced in Traverse City by Pancake Boy Productions. Big thanks to Old Town Playhouse. Paint Night, by the way, is running through March 21st, so get your tickets at oldtownplayhouse.com. Additional gratitude to the Fresh Coast Film Festival Traverse City, a new celebration of Great Lakes stories and culture filled with adventure. Thursday, April 30th through Sunday, May 3rd, presented by nonprofit host Old Mission Culture Company. And special thanks to our lead supporter, the wonderful West Shore Bank. You can start saving today at westshorebank.com.